The sun was dying when Ronin Hale stepped into the street. Not the quick death of winter twilight, but the slow orange bleed of a desert evening that stretched shadows into monsters and turned dust into gold. The kind of light that made everything look either beautiful or doomed, depending on how you squinted at it. Ronin figured he'd stopped squinting a long time ago. What was in front of him was what it was, and right now, that was 9 mounted men with rifles, and the kind of smiles that said they'd done this before. The town, if you could still call it that, had a name once. Probably still did, somewhere on a map that hadn't been updated in 15 years. But maps didn't matter much when half the buildings were empty and the other half were waiting to be. Dust and warped wood, broken windows like missing teeth. The kind of place people pass through on their way to somewhere better, except most folks who came through here weren't heading anywhere good. Ronin had arrived 6 weeks ago on a horse that looked about as done with the world as he did. No fanfare, no introductions. Just a man with a bedroll and a rifle that had seen more use than mercy. He'd rented a corner of the old livery stable, paid 2 weeks up front in silver coins that didn't shine anymore, and set about doing what he always did when he landed somewhere new, keeping his head down and his mouth shut. Fixing things helped with that. The livery door had a hinge that screamed every time someone opened it. Ronin oiled it. The pump near the schoolhouse wheezed and spat rust before it gave you water. He pulled it apart, cleaned the valves, put it back together. When the widow Callahan's porch steps split clean through and dumped her in the dirt, he showed up the next morning with wood and nails and didn't say much while he worked. She offered him cornbread. He ate it on her porch and left before she could ask questions. People noticed him, the way people in small towns always notice strangers, but they didn't know him. And that was how Ronin liked it, except for Alara Voss. She taught school in a building that had been a church before the last preacher drank himself horizontal and never got back up. 8 students on a good day, 5 on a bad one. She was younger than Ronin by maybe 15 years, but she had the kind of tired in her eyes that didn't come from age. It came from carrying weight that wasn't hers and refusing to put it down. Her land sat 2 miles east of town, a patch of scrub and hardpan that would have been worthless except for one thing, the spring. The only reliable water source for 20 miles that didn't taste like iron and regret. Her father had dug the well before he died, and Alara had held on to the property ever since, even when cattle prices dropped and the railroad changed routes, and half the town packed up for California. She didn't talk much about why she stayed. Ronin didn't ask, but he noticed the way she looked at the horizon sometimes, like she was waiting for something she knew was coming but couldn't name. Turned out, she didn't have to wait long. Victor Crow arrived on a Tuesday. Not alone. Men like Crow never traveled alone. He had 8 riders with him, all of them cut from the same cloth, hard faces, expensive guns, the kind of casual arrogance that came from knowing the law wouldn't touch you because you were the law, or close enough that it didn't matter. They wore dusters that didn't have dust on them. Their boots had polish. Even their horses looked mean. Crow himself was tall, clean-shaven, with the kind of smile that made you want to check your pockets. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than most folks in town made in a year, and his hat had a silver band that caught the light when he tipped it to the ladies. Polite, professional. The kind of man who'd shoot you in the back and send flowers to your funeral. He set up in the old hotel, which hadn't been a hotel in anything but name for 5 years. The owner, a nervous man named Pettigrew, suddenly had paying guests again, and he didn't ask questions about why they needed the whole second floor or why they kept their rifles close even at dinner. Crow called a meeting the next day. Not everyone came, but enough did, scared enough, curious enough, desperate enough. They gathered in the hotel's dining room, which smelled like old coffee and the kind of hope that had gone sour, and Crow stood at the front like a preacher about to deliver salvation. "I represent the Frontier Development Company," he said, his voice smooth as creek stones. "We're investing in this region's future. Rail expansion, mining operations, infrastructure that'll bring jobs, money, opportunity." Someone coughed. Probably Jed Merrick, who'd been coughing since spring and didn't look like he'd make it to winter. "But progress requires planning," Crow continued, charrettes, "and planning requires control of key resources, water primarily." Alara Voss, sitting near the back, went very still. "We're prepared to make generous offers to current landholders," Crow said. "Fair market value, plus a relocation bonus. Sign the papers, take the money, start fresh somewhere else. And if we don't? That was Dutch Harrow, who ran the general store and didn't trust anyone who smiled that much. Crow's smile didn't falter. Then you'll be making a choice, and choices have consequences. It wasn't a threat. Not legally. But everyone in that room heard it anyway. The meeting ended with Crow handing out papers and shaking hands like he was running for office. Most folks took the papers. Some took them home and burned them. Others actually read them, saw the numbers, and started doing math that didn't add up to staying. Within 3 days, 2 families packed up and left. Within a week, 5 more were packing. Ronin watched it happen from the livery stable, where he'd taken to sleeping because the corner was quiet and no one bothered him. He didn't go to the meeting, didn't take any papers, didn't involve himself in town business because town business had a way of becoming personal business, and personal business had a way of getting people killed. He'd learned that the hard way. But on the 8th day after Crow arrived, Alara Voss showed up at the livery just after dawn. She didn't knock, just stood in the doorway with the early light behind her, turning her into a silhouette that could have been anyone. Except Ronin knew the set of her shoulders, the way she held her head like she was ready to fight gravity itself. "They came to my place last night," she said. Ronin was checking the hooves on his horse, but he stopped. Didn't look up yet. "Who?" "3 of Crow's men. Said they wanted to discuss options. Told me I had until the end of the week to sign or they'd come back with different paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" "The kind written in legal language that means they'll take it anyway." Ronin set the hoof down carefully. Stood. Looked at her. "You tell the sheriff?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sheriff Brocken? He left 2 days ago. Said he had family business in Santa Fe. Took his badge with him." "Convenient, isn't it?" Silence settled between them, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable but wasn't easy either. "Why are you telling me this?" Ronin asked. Alara stepped into the stable. The light caught her face now, dirt under her fingernails, a bruise on her wrist she hadn't had yesterday, eyes that had stopped asking for help and started demanding it. "Because you're the only person in this town who doesn't look scared," she said. "And I need to know if that's because you're stupid or because you know something the rest of us don't." Ronin almost smiled. "Could be both." "Could be, but I don't think so." She came closer, close enough that he could see the faint scar on her jaw, the way her hands were steady, even though her voice wasn't. "You're not from here. You don't have land, don't have family, don't have anything tying you down. You could leave tomorrow and no one would blame you. That an option you're offering?" "No?" She said it flat, final. "It's a question. Are you the kind of man who runs when things get bad, or are you the kind who stands?" Ronin looked at her for a long time, longer than was polite. He was measuring something, though he wasn't sure what. The weight of old promises, maybe. The cost of getting involved. The difference between what a man could do and what he should do, which weren't always the same thing, and usually weren't even close. "I'm the kind of man who's tired of running," he said finally. Something shifted in her expression. Not relief exactly, more like recognition. "Good," she said, "because I think we're about to need that." She left before he could ask what she meant, but he found out soon enough. Crow didn't waste time. On the 9th day, his riders started making their presence known. Not overtly, nothing you could point to and call intimidation in a court of law. But they were there, sitting on horses outside the general store, watching who came and went. Leaning against the wall of the old saloon, rifles visible but not raised. Riding slow past Alara's land at dawn and dusk, close enough to the fence line that their message was clear. "We know where you live." The town got quieter. People stopped gathering in the street. Conversations happened in whispers. When Ronin walked to the pump for water, folks looked away. He didn't blame them. Fear was practical. It kept you breathing. But it also made you small. On the 10th day, Ronin walked into the general store just as Dutch Harrow was closing up. The old man looked surprised to see him. Most people didn't linger after dark anymore, but he unlocked the door anyway. "Need something?" Dutch asked. "Information," Ronin said. Dutch's eyes flicked to the window, checking the street. "That a commodity I'm selling now?" "Everyone sells something." The old man considered that. Then he nodded to the back room. Come on. They sat at a table covered in catalogs and receipts. Dutch poured 2 glasses of whiskey that looked like it had been aging since before statehood and probably tasted like it too. What do you want to know? Dutch asked. How many people are staying? Staying? Not leaving, not signing Crow's papers. How many? Dutch took a drink, grimaced. Besides Alara, maybe a dozen. Families, I mean. Individuals, maybe 30, if you count everyone. But counting doesn't mean much when folks are too scared to stand together. They talk to each other? Used to. Not so much anymore. Why? Because Crow's riders have ears, and anyone who talks too loud about resistance tends to have accidents. Nothing fatal, not yet. But a barn catches fire. A wagon wheel breaks. Someone's kid gets followed home from school. Dutch set his glass down. It's a message, and it's working. Ronin turned his glass but didn't drink. What about you? Me? Dutch laughed without smiling. I'm old, Hale. Too old to run, too tired to fight. I'll stay because I don't have anywhere else to go. But don't mistake that for courage. Courage isn't about not being scared. No? What's it about then? Ronin finally took a drink. The whiskey tasted exactly like he expected. Terrible. Being scared and standing anyway. Dutch looked at him for a long moment. You planning something? Thinking about it? Thinking's dangerous. So's doing nothing. Also true. Dutch refilled both glasses. You know what you're walking into if you push back against Crow? I've got an idea. He's not just some land agent with a mean streak. He's connected. Frontier Development Company has money. Lawyers, politicians. They've done this before. Bought up half of New Mexico, ran people off their land in Colorado. You stand against him. You're not just fighting 9 men with guns. You're fighting a machine. Ronin nodded slowly. I've fought machines before. And? I'm still here. Dutch studied him, eyes narrowing. Who are you really? It was the question everyone wanted to ask but didn't. The question Ronin had avoided answering for 6 weeks because answers led to stories, and stories led to expectations, and expectations got people killed. But if he was going to do this, really do this, the town needed to know what they were getting, or what they were risking. You ever hear of a U.S. Marshal named Hale? Ronin asked quietly. Operated out of Kansas and Missouri 15, 20 years back? Dutch's expression changed. Ronin Hale. Jesus. He sat back. I thought you were dead. People keep saying that. The stories, most of them are true. Dutch looked at him like he was seeing a ghost. Maybe he was. You killed, what was it, 40 men? 50? 36. Ronin's voice was flat. And I didn't kill them all. Some went to trial, some went to prison. But, yeah, 36 didn't make it that far. Because they resisted arrest. Because they drew on me. Ronin met Dutch's eyes. I didn't hunt men for sport. I hunted them because they needed hunting. Killers, thieves, men who burned towns and murdered families and thought the frontier was too big for justice to reach them. I proved them wrong. Until you disappeared. Until I quit. Why? Ronin's jaw tightened. Because I looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize what was looking back. Dutch absorbed that. Then, and now? Now I'm just a man who fixes broken things. And if Crow won't let you? Ronin didn't answer right away. He reached for his rifle, which was leaning against the wall, brought it over, set it on the table between them. It was an old Winchester, well-maintained but heavily used. The stock had scratches, the barrel had wear, and carved into the wood, small, precise, impossible to miss, were 36 notches. Dutch stared at it. I stopped counting after this, Ronin said quietly. Told myself I was done. That the next time I killed someone, it'd be because I had no choice. Not because it was my job. And if Crow pushes you to that? Ronin picked up the rifle, looked at it. Then he'll find out why people thought I was dead. Word spread fast. By the next morning, everyone knew who Ronin Hale was, or had been. The stories came out in whispers. then in conversations, then in arguments about what it meant and whether it changed anything. Some folks saw hope, a legendary lawman right here, right when they needed him. Others saw danger. Because men like Ronin Hale didn't just attract trouble, they were trouble. And if Crow found out what he was dealing with, things would escalate. Fast. Alara showed up at the livery again that afternoon. "Is it true?" she asked. "Depends what you heard. That you were a marshal, that you killed 36 men." 36, Ronin corrected. "And yeah," she processed that. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would it have changed anything?" "Maybe." "How?" She didn't answer right away, just stood there, arms crossed, looking at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle that kept shifting pieces. "I don't know," she admitted finally, "but I deserve to know who I was asking for help." "You didn't ask for help. You asked if I was the kind of man who runs. And you're not." "No." "Because you used to be a marshal." "Because I'm tired of being the kind of man who watches bad things happen and tells himself it's not his problem." Alara's expression softened, just a little. "Crow's going to find out. Probably already has. And he'll make a choice, back off or double down. Which do you think he'll do?" Ronin checked the rifle's action. Smooth, clean, ready. "Men like Crow don't back off. They push until something pushes back harder. So we push." "We?" She stepped closer. "You think you're the only one who's tired of running? I've been holding this land for 8 years, alone. Every drought, every bad season, every man who thought a woman couldn't handle it, I proved them wrong. I'm not signing Crow's papers, and I'm not leaving. He'll come for you." "Let him." Ronin looked at her. Really looked. Saw the steel underneath the exhaustion. The kind of strength that didn't come from muscle or meanness, but from sheer, stubborn refusal to break. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. "My father taught me." "Taught you or taught you well?" "Put a can on a fence and find out." He almost smiled. "We might need to." That night, Ronin called a meeting. Not at the hotel, that was Crow's territory now. Not at the church. That felt too much like praying for a miracle instead of making one. He picked the old barn at the edge of town, the one that hadn't held livestock in years but still had good bones. 14 people showed up. Not 30. Not even 20. 14. But it was a start. Dutch Harrow, Alara Voss, a young couple named Sam and Marie Tillman who had a baby and a mortgage, old Jed Merrick, coughing but upright, the widow Callahan, a handful of others, farmers, a blacksmith, a woman who ran the boarding house. They stood in the dim light of oil lamps, waiting. Ronin didn't give them a speech, didn't try to inspire them. He just laid out the facts. "Crow wants this town," he said, or more specifically, he wants the water. Alara's land, the spring, the well, that's the prize. Everything else is just leverage. He'll keep squeezing until people leave or sell, and when there's no one left to resist, he'll take what he wants and call it legal. "So what do we do?" Sam Tillman asked. He looked young, scared, like he wished he wasn't here but couldn't figure out where else to go. "We make it cost him more than it's worth," Ronin said. "How?" Marie Tillman's voice was sharp. "He has guns, money, the law on his side. What do we have?" "This town," Ronin said. "And each other." "That's not enough," someone muttered. "It's what we've got." Silence. Heavy. Uncertain. Then Alara spoke. "He's right. We can't outspend Crow. Can't outlawyer him. But we can make this harder than he planned. Make him bleed money. Make his men nervous. Make every day here a reminder that we're not rolling over." "And when he decides to stop asking nicely?" the widow Callahan asked. Ronin met her eyes. "Then we stop asking too." The group shifted. Uncomfortable. This was the line, the moment where talk turned into action, and action meant risk. "I'm not telling anyone to stay," Ronin continued. "If you want to leave, leave. Take Crow's money, start over. No one here will judge you. But if you stay, you need to understand what that means. It means standing together, watching each other's backs. And when the time comes, it means fighting." "You mean killing," Jed Merrick said. His voice was rough, but his eyes were clear. "I mean defending what's yours." "Same thing sometimes." Yeah, Ronin agreed. Sometimes it is. Another silence. Longer this time. Then Dutch Harrow cleared his throat. I'm staying, Alara nodded. Me too. The Tillmans looked at each other. Some unspoken conversation passed between them. Finally, Sam said, We're in. One by one, the others agreed. Not all of them. 2 people left without a word, and Ronin didn't blame them. But 12 stayed. 12 people against 9 guns and a company with unlimited resources. It should have felt hopeless. Instead, it felt like the start of something. The next 3 days, Ronin turned those 12 people into something resembling a plan. Not an army. They didn't have the training, the weapons, or the time, but they had knowledge of the town, the buildings, the land. They had desperation, which made people creative, and they had Ronin, who'd spent 20 years learning how to turn geography into advantage. He walked the town with Alara, Dutch, and Sam, mapping sight lines and choke points, noted which buildings had second floors, which had clear fields of fire, which could be defended or abandoned. He taught them basic tactics, crossfire, suppression, retreat routes. Nothing fancy. Just enough to survive the first 30 seconds of chaos, because after that, plans didn't matter. Only instinct and luck. You really think this'll work? Sam asked as they stood on the roof of the old general store, looking down at the main street. No, Ronin said honestly. But I think it's better than doing nothing. Sam laughed. Nervous, but genuine. That's not exactly inspiring. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to give you a chance. And if we lose, then we lose standing up. Sam thought about that, then nodded. My grandfather used to say that. He fought in the war, said there were worse things than dying. Your grandfather was right. They kept preparing. Alara organized the women, not because she thought they were less capable, but because Crow's men wouldn't expect them. She armed them with shotguns, taught them how to load and fire from cover, and positioned them in windows overlooking the street. You don't have to be a good shot, she told them. You just have to be loud. Make them think there are more of us than there are. Dutch handled supplies. Ammunition, food, water, medical kits cobbled together from what they had. Not much, but enough. And Ronin? Ronin checked his rifle, cleaned it, loaded it, and tried not to think about the fact that he'd promised himself he'd never do this again. Crow made his move on the 14th day. Not subtle, not quiet. He rode into town at noon with all 8 of his men, slow and deliberate, like a procession. They stopped in the middle of the main street, horses stamping, dust rising. Ronin was waiting. He stood alone, rifle in hand, 30 feet from where Crow sat his horse. Behind him, hidden, 12 people held their breath. Mr. Hale, Crow said, smiling like they were old friends, I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk. So talk. I understand you've been organizing resistance, encouraging people to refuse our very generous offers. I've been encouraging people to keep what's theirs. That's a matter of perspective. No, Ronin said. It's a matter of law. Crow's smile didn't waver. I have the law on my side, Mr. Hale. Contracts, deeds, territorial authority. What do you have? People who aren't leaving. People die, Mr. Hale. Towns die. That's the way of things. Not this time. The smile finally faded. Crow leaned forward in his saddle. I know who you are. Ronin Hale. The marshal. The killer. You think that scares me? Should it? No. Crow's voice went cold. Because you're not a marshal anymore. You're just an old man with a rifle and bad knees, and I have 8 men who'll put you in the ground before you can blink. Ronin didn't move, didn't flinch. You're probably right. That caught Crow off guard. Then why are you still standing here? Because sometimes a man has to decide what he's willing to die for, Ronin said quietly, and I decided this is it. Crow stared at him, reading, calculating, trying to figure out if this was a bluff. It wasn't. Finally, Crow straightened. You have until sundown tomorrow. Sign the papers, take the money, and leave. Or we'll burn this town to ash and take what we want anyway. We'll be here, Ronin said. Crow turned his horse, rode out. His men followed, and the town, hidden, watching, waiting, exhaled. Ishbaz. That night, no one slept. They couldn't. Tomorrow was coming, and it was bringing fire with it. Ronin sat in the livery, rifle across his lap, staring at the 36 notches carved into the wood. Alara found him there just before dawn. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Yeah," Ronin replied, "I do." "Why?" He looked at her, tired, worn, but not broken. "Because if I don't," he said, "I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what kind of man I really am." She sat down next to him, close, quiet. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you're a good man." Ronin almost laughed. "You don't know me. I know you stayed when you could have run. I know you're risking your life for people you barely know. That counts for something." "Maybe." They sat in silence as the sun started to rise, and somewhere in the distance, horses were coming. The sun climbed slow that morning, like it knew what was coming and wanted to give everyone a few more minutes of peace before the world caught fire. Ronin stood on the porch of the general store, watching the eastern road. Behind him, the town was quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of early morning, but the stretched-tight quiet of a held breath. People were in position, hidden, waiting. Probably praying, though he'd told them prayer wouldn't stop bullets. Preparation might. Dutch appeared at his elbow, moving quieter than a man his age had any right to. "They're coming," he said. "Spotted dust about 2 miles out." "How many?" "All of them, looks like. 9 riders." Ronin nodded. He'd expected that. Crow wasn't the type to bluff with half his hand. If he said he'd burn the town, he meant it, and he'd bring everyone he had to make sure it stuck. "Everyone ready?" Ronin asked. "As they'll ever be." Dutch's hand shook slightly as he checked his rifle. Not fear, age. His knuckles were swollen, arthritic. Holding a gun probably hurt, but he held it anyway. "You don't have to be here," Ronin said. Dutch snorted. "Yeah, I do. Someone's got to make sure you don't get all noble and get yourself killed in the first minute." "Wasn't planning on it. Plans change fast when the shooting starts." "I know." They stood there together, 2 old men with weapons that had seen better days, waiting for younger men who thought violence was still an adventure instead of a graveyard. Alara came out of the boarding house across the street. She'd tied her hair back, practical, and she carried a shotgun like she knew which end did the damage. Her face was pale, but set, determined. "North and south positions are ready," she reported. "Marie's got the boarding house windows. Widow Callahan's in the church tower with Sam. Can she shoot from up there?" "She says yes. I believe her." Ronin did too. The widow had lost 2 husbands to frontier violence, one to Comanche raiders, one to a claim jumper's bullet. She had the look of someone who'd stopped being surprised by cruelty and started getting angry about it instead. "What about Jed?" Ronin asked. "He's in the livery. Said the hayloft gives him a clear shot down the street." Alara paused. "He's coughing worse today." "He gonna make it through this?" "He says he'll make it long enough." Ronin wanted to argue, to tell her that putting a dying man in a firing position was cruel, but Jed had volunteered, had insisted, actually, said he'd rather go out swinging than wheezing in a bed. Who was Ronin to tell him no? "All right," Ronin said. "Stay out of sight until I give the signal." "What's the signal?" "You'll know it when you hear it." Alara gave him a look that said she didn't love that answer, but she nodded anyway. Started to leave, then stopped. "Ronin?" "Yeah?" "Don't do anything stupid." He almost smiled. "Define stupid." "Dying in the first 30 seconds. I'll try to make it to 45. She didn't smile back, just looked at him with those tired, fierce eyes. "I mean it. We need you." "You need yourselves more," Ronin said. "I'm just the old bastard who showed you where to point the guns." "You're more than that." "Maybe." He met her gaze. "But if this goes bad, don't wait for me. Don't try to be a hero. You grab whoever you can and you run. Understand?" "I'm not running." "Alara, I said I'm not running." Her voice was iron. "I told you that already. This is my land, my town. I'm not leaving it to men like Crow." Ronin wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that bravery was fine, but survival was better. But he recognized the look in her eyes because he'd seen it in the mirror plenty of times. The look that said arguing was pointless because the decision was already made, written in bone-deep stubbornness that wouldn't bend even if it broke. "All right," he said quietly, "then stay low and shoot straight." She nodded once. Then she was gone, disappearing into the boarding house like smoke. Dutch watched her go. "That woman's gonna get herself killed." "Probably." "You gonna let her?" "Not if I can help it." "And if you can't?" Ronin didn't answer. There wasn't a good answer, just the truth. And the truth was that people died in fights like this. Good people, brave people, people who deserved better than a bullet in a forgotten town that wouldn't even make the newspapers. But they were here anyway. And so was he. The dust cloud grew closer. Ronin could see shapes now, riders, moving steady, not rushing. They had time, had numbers, had confidence. That confidence was going to cost them. "Here we go," Dutch muttered. Ronin checked his rifle one last time. 36 notches in the stock, each one a name he'd stopped saying out loud because saying them made them real, and keeping them real made them heavy. He wondered if he'd be adding to that count today. Wondered if it mattered. Then the riders came into view, and there wasn't time to wonder anymore. Victor Crow led them in, straight down the main street like he owned it. His black suit was dust-free despite the ride, his horse groomed and calm. The men flanking him looked different in daylight, harder, meaner. The kind of men who'd done wet work before and slept fine after. They stopped 50 feet from where Ronin stood. 9 men, 9 rifles, 9 pairs of eyes that looked at him like he was already dead. Crow dismounted slow, deliberate, making a show of it. "Mr. Hale," he called, "I see you're still here." "Told you I would be." "So you did." Crow walked forward, closing the distance to 30 feet. His men stayed mounted, rifles resting across their saddles, ready but not raised. Yet. "Last chance," Crow said. "Walk away. Live to see tomorrow." "That an offer or a threat?" "It's a courtesy. One I'm extending because I respect what you used to be." Crow tilted his head. "But used to be doesn't mean much now, does it?" "Depends on who's asking." Crow smiled. "You know what I think? I think you're scared. I think you've been running from who you were for so long that you forgot how to be that man. And now you're standing here pretending you still have it in you, when we both know." "You talk a lot," Ronin interrupted. The smile froze. "Excuse me? I said you talk a lot. For a man who came here to do something, you sure spend a lot of time explaining it first." One of the riders, a young kid with a thin mustache and a cocky grin, laughed. "Old man's got a mouth on him." "Shut up, Carson," Crow said without looking. But Carson didn't shut up. He urged his horse forward, still grinning. "What's the matter, old-timer? You missed the part where there's 9 of us and 1 of you?" "I can count," Ronin said. "Can you shoot?" Carson's hand drifted toward his gun. Not drawing, just hovering, testing. "Because I'm thinking maybe all those stories about you are just that, stories, and the real Ronin Hale died years ago, and you're just some broke-down drifter wearing his name." "Could be," Ronin agreed. "So why don't you prove me wrong?" Carson's grin widened. "Draw. Show us what a real marshal looks like." Ronin didn't move, didn't even blink, just stood there, rifle loose in his hands, watching Carson like he was a bug on a wall. Annoying, but not threatening. "I'm not going to draw on you, kid," Ronin said. "Why not? Scared?" "Because you're not worth the bullet." The grin vanished. Carson's face went red. "The hell did you just say?" "You heard me." "Carson." Crow's voice was sharp now. "Stand down!" But Carson was already moving. He swung off his horse, boots hitting the dirt hard. His hand went to his gun, not hovering now, but gripping, ready. "I'm going to enjoy this," Carson said. Ronin sighed. "No, you're not." It happened fast. Carson drew, or tried to. His hand cleared leather, the gun coming up, and Ronin's rifle cracked once. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a single precise shot that punched through Carson's gun hand and sent the pistol spinning into the dust. Carson screamed, grabbing his wrist, blood pouring between his fingers. The other riders went tense. Guns started to rise. "Next one won't be a hand," Ronin said. His voice was calm, flat. The voice of a man who'd done this so many times it was reflex. "It'll be a head. Think about that before you do something you can't take back. The riders hesitated, looked at Crow. Crow's face was stone. Stand down. They didn't lower their guns, but they didn't shoot either. Carson was on his knees now, whimpering. The cocky kid from 30 seconds ago was gone, replaced by someone who'd just learned what real violence looked like. Get him out of here, Crow said. Two riders dismounted, grabbed Carson, hauled him back toward the horses. He was crying now, babbling, saying things that didn't make sense. Crow watched them go, then turned back to Ronin. That was a mistake. He drew first. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about you. Crow's voice dropped, cold and final. You just declared war, Hale. And war is what you're going to get. Then get on with it. Crow smiled. It wasn't friendly. Oh, I will, but not like this. Not quick. He started backing toward his horse. You want to protect this town? Fine. Let's see how well you do when it's burning. He mounted, looked at his remaining men. Torch it. Everything. Start with the boarding house. The riders spread out, pulling bottles from their saddlebags. Bottles with rags stuffed in the necks. Bottles that caught the sunlight and promised nothing but ash. And that's when Ronin gave the signal. He raised his rifle and fired, not at the riders, but straight up into the air. One shot, sharp, clear. The sound echoed down the street, and the town came alive. Windows exploded with gunfire. The boarding house, the church, the general store, every position Ronin had mapped erupted at once. Shotguns boomed, rifles cracked, the air filled with smoke and noise and the high, panicked screaming of horses. One of Crow's men went down immediately, falling sideways off his horse with a hole in his chest. Another grabbed his leg, howling. A third tried to wheel his horse around and got clipped in the shoulder, the impact spinning him halfway out of the saddle. Chaos. Pure, sudden, overwhelming chaos. Crow's horse reared. He fought to control it, eyes wide, scanning the street for targets. But there were none. Just muzzle flashes from windows and doorways, invisible shooters tearing his plan apart. Fall back, Crow shouted. Fall back! But falling back meant turning around, and turning around meant exposing their backs. One rider tried it anyway, got 10 feet before Jed Merrick's rifle spoke from the hayloft and punched him out of the saddle like a hammer blow. Ronin didn't watch. He was moving, running low across the street toward the alley beside the old saloon. Dutch was right behind him, wheezing but keeping up. How long? Dutch gasped. Long as we can make it, Ronin said. They reached the alley. Ronin leaned out, sighted down the street. Crow's men were scattered now, trying to find cover, trying to regroup. But the town had been built narrow on purpose, old defensive instincts from Indian war days. There wasn't much cover, just open street and killing ground. 3 men were down. Carson was gone, dragged off by whoever'd grabbed him. That left 5 riders, plus Crow. 6 against 12. Better odds. Still not good. One of the riders, a big man with a scar across his jaw, managed to get behind a water trough. He started returning fire, methodical, picking targets. A window shattered in the church. Someone screamed. Ronin sighted on him, breathed, squeezed, the rifle kicked. The big man jerked, grabbed his neck, and went down. 5 left. Another bottle flew through the air, one of the Molotov cocktails they'd brought. It smashed against the side of the boarding house, fire blooming orange and hungry. No, Ronin muttered. He looked at Dutch. Get to Alara. Get everyone out of there before it spreads. What about you? I'm ending this. Dutch started to argue, but Ronin was already moving. He broke from the alley, rifle up, running straight down the middle of the street toward where Crow was trying to rally his men. It was stupid, suicidal, everything he'd told Alara not to do. But someone had to break the line, and it might as well be him. Bullets tore the air around him. One caught his left arm, not deep, just a graze, but it burned like fire and made him stumble. He kept running. Another shot clipped his boot heel, nearly sent him sprawling, 30 feet, 20. He dropped to one knee, brought the rifle up, and fired 3 times in quick succession. The first shot missed. The second took a rider in the shoulder. The third hit a horse, and the animal went down screaming, throwing its rider into the dirt. 4 left. Crow saw him, saw what he was doing. And for the first time since this started, Crow looked rattled. "Kill him!" Crow shouted. "Kill him now!" The remaining riders turned, focused, 4 rifles all swinging toward Ronin at once. He was exposed, out of position, out of time. This was how it ended. And then Sam Tillman came out of nowhere. The young farmer, barely 25, scared out of his mind 10 minutes ago, charged from the side door of the general store with a shotgun and emptied both barrels into the nearest rider. The man flew backward, dead before he hit the ground. 3 left. But Sam was exposed too now. Reloading. Fumbling with the shells, one of Crow's men saw him, raised his rifle. Alara shot him first. She came out of the boarding house, smoke pouring behind her, fire climbing the walls, and put a rifle round through the man's chest. He dropped. 2 left. The last rider, a lean, hard-faced man with gray in his beard, looked at Crow, looked at the burning building, looked at the bodies in the street, and ran. Just turned his horse and bolted, riding hard toward the eastern road like hell itself was chasing him. No one stopped him. That left Crow, alone, dismounted, standing in the middle of the street with his rifle and nothing else. Ronin stood up slow. His arm was bleeding, his leg hurt where the bullet had clipped his heel, and his ears were ringing from the gunfire. But he was standing. Crow wasn't running, wasn't surrendering either. He just stood there, rifle raised, sighting down the barrel at Ronin. "You should have taken the money," Crow said. "Probably. You know I'm going to kill you." "You can try." For a long moment, neither of them moved. 2 men, 2 rifles, 2 very different ideas about how this ended. Then Crow smiled. "You're fast, I'll give you that. But you're old, and old men make mistakes." "Everyone makes mistakes," Ronin said. "Not me." "We'll see." Crow's finger tightened on the trigger. Ronin saw it, saw the muscles shift, saw the micro-movement that said the shot was coming. He moved first, dropped, rolled left, came up firing. Crow's shot went high, right where Ronin had been standing a half-second ago. Ronin's shot didn't miss. It hit Crow in the right hand, shattering bone and metal both. The rifle fell from nerveless fingers. Crow screamed, grabbing his wrist, blood pouring. Ronin walked forward, slow, steady. Crow stumbled back, eyes wide. "Wait, I'm done waiting," Ronin said. He brought the rifle up, aimed it dead center at Crow's chest. This was the moment, the choice. The thing he'd been avoiding for 15 years. Kill him. Add another notch. Let the past swallow the present whole. Or don't. Crow was on his knees now, cradling his ruined hand. "Please," he said. The arrogance was gone. The Polish, just a man in pain staring at his own mortality. "Please what?" Ronin asked. "Don't." "Why not?" "I'll leave. I'll tell the company this town's too much trouble. You'll never see me again. You'll come back, or someone like you will." "No, I swear, just please." Ronin stared at him. At this man who'd threatened innocent people, who'd burned buildings, who'd brought violence to a place that didn't deserve it. He could kill him, should kill him. Every instinct, every year of training, every scar on his soul said to pull the trigger and end it. But then he'd be that man again. The one with 36 notches, the one who solved problems with bullets and called it justice, and he was so tired of being that man. "Get out," Ronin said. Crow blinked. "What?" "Get out. Take your wounded. Ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of. And if I ever see you again, if you ever set foot in this territory again, I won't give you a second chance." "You're letting me go?" "I'm letting you live. There's a difference." Ronin lowered the rifle. "Now move before I change my mind." Crow didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his hand, and half ran toward where one of the horses stood, Carson's horse, ironically. He mounted awkwardly, one-handed, and rode out. Didn't look back. Ronin watched him go, then turned. The street was a wreck. Bodies, blood, spent shell casings everywhere. The boarding house was burning hard now, flames eating through the roof. But the people were alive. Dutch was helping Marie Tillman out of a window. Sam was leaning against a wall, shaking. Alara stood in the middle of the street, shotgun still in her hands, staring at the carnage. She saw Ronin, walked over, You let him go. Yeah. Why? Because killing him wouldn't change anything, wouldn't make this town safer, wouldn't make me feel better. He looked at her. It'd just add another mark to a list I'm tired of carrying. Alara studied him, then nodded. Okay. Okay. You made a choice. Your choice. I'm not going to second guess it. Some people might. Some people aren't me. They stood there together watching the fire burn. After a minute, Dutch walked over. Jed's gone, he said quietly. Ronin closed his eyes. The cough? The cough, and maybe the excitement. Hard to say. Dutch's voice was rough. He got 3 shots off before he went down. All of them hit. He died doing what he wanted. That's supposed to make it better? No, but it's something. Ronin nodded. Another name for a list he didn't keep anymore. Another good person gone because someone else decided their greed was worth more than human life. We need to put out that fire, Alara said, before it spreads. I'll get people organized, Dutch said. They scattered, started moving, started doing the work of saving what they could. Ronin stayed where he was for a moment longer, looking at his rifle, at the 36 notches that still marked it. He hadn't added a 37th. He wondered if that made him weak or wise. Decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that the town was still standing. The people were alive. And for the first time in a long time, Ronin Hale had chosen something other than violence, even if violence had chosen him first. He turned and joined the others, helping to fight the fire that was trying to claim what bullets hadn't. And somewhere in the distance, Victor Crow rode away with his shattered hand and his shattered pride, carrying a message back to the Frontier Development Company that this town, this forgotten, stubborn, impossible town, was more trouble than it was worth. The message wouldn't stick. Ronin knew that. Ronin knew men like Crow always came back, or sent someone worse, but that was tomorrow's problem. Today, they'd won, and that was enough. The fire took 3 hours to kill, not for lack of trying. Everyone who could walk formed a bucket line from the pump to the boarding house, passing water hand to hand while smoke choked the air and embers drifted like fireflies. The building was too far gone to save, but they kept the flames from spreading to the general store and the old saloon. Small victories when you were measuring loss in ashes. Ronin worked the line with everyone else, his arm wrapped in a strip of cloth that was already soaked through with blood. It hurt like hell, but he'd had worse. The bullet had carved a neat furrow through the muscle without hitting bone. He'd live. Probably have another scar to add to the collection, but what was one more at this point? Marie Tillman worked next to him, passing buckets with mechanical efficiency. Her face was streaked with soot and tears she wasn't bothering to hide. Sam won't talk, she said quietly. He just sits there staring at his hands. Give him time. He killed a man today. He saved my life today, Ronin corrected. There's a difference. Is there? She looked at him, eyes raw. Because right now I'm not sure my husband knows that. Ronin didn't have an answer for her. Sam Tillman had crossed a line this afternoon, one you couldn't uncross. You could justify it, rationalize it, tell yourself it was necessary, but the weight didn't care about justification. It sat on you anyway, heavy and permanent, and all you could do was learn to carry it, or let it crush you. Tell him to come find me later, Ronin said. We'll talk. Will it help? I don't know, but it might hurt less. Marie nodded and moved down the line, replaced by Dutch, who was breathing hard and looked about ready to keel over. You should sit down, Ronin told him. I'm fine. You look like a strong wind could knock you over. Then it's a good thing there's no wind. Dutch passed another bucket, grimacing. How's the arm? Attached. That's something. Dutch glanced at the boarding house, where the roof had finally collapsed inward with a shower of sparks. How much you think we lost? Too much. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. They worked in silence for a while. The sun was dropping toward the horizon now, painting everything in shades of orange and red that looked too much like the fire for comfort. Shadows stretched long across the street, turning the town into something unfamiliar, haunted. When the last of the flames finally died, people started drifting away, back to their homes, their families, their private reckonings with what had happened. Some would sleep, some would drink, some would just sit in the dark and try to make sense of a day that didn't make sense. Ronin stayed. He walked through the debris, looking at the bodies they'd laid out in a row near the church. 4 of Crow's men, plus Jed Merrick. The widow Callahan had covered them with whatever cloth she could find, old curtains, a tablecloth, someone's spare shirt. It wasn't dignified, but it was what they had. Alara found him there, standing over Jed's body. "We should bury him properly," she said, "in the morning. It's too dark now. Dutch is making a coffin, says he's got enough wood left over from the boarding house repairs." She paused. "What about the others?" "Burn them." She looked at him sharply. "That's not—" "They came here to kill us," Ronin said. "They don't deserve the same ground as Jed. Burn them and scatter the ashes. Let them be forgotten." Alara started to argue, then stopped. Maybe she saw something in his face. Maybe she just realized that arguing about how to handle enemy corpses wasn't worth the energy. Either way, she nodded. "I'll tell Dutch," she said. She started to leave, but Ronin caught her arm. "You all right?" "Define all right. Not shot, not bleeding, still standing." Then yes, I'm all right." She pulled free gently. "But if you're asking if I'm fine, that's a different question." "I'm not asking if you're fine. Nobody's fine after this." "Then what are you asking?" Ronin looked at her, really looked, saw the exhaustion carved into her face, the way her hands shook slightly when she wasn't holding them tight. Saw someone who'd been strong for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to not have to be. "I'm asking if you need anything," he said. She was quiet for a moment, then, "I need this town to survive. I need to know that what we did today meant something, and I need to believe that Crow's not coming back. I can't promise you the last part. I know. But the rest? Yeah, this town's going to survive. And what we did today, what you did, it meant everything." Alara's jaw tightened. She looked away, blinking hard. "I shot a man. You saved Sam's life. It's still the same thing." "No," Ronin said. "It's not." "How do you figure?" "Because one's about what you did, the other's about why you did it." He shifted his weight, his bad leg complaining. "You think I don't carry every person I ever killed? Every face? Every name? They're all here." He tapped his chest. "But so is the reason, and the reason matters." "Does it make it easier?" "No, but it makes it possible to live with." She looked at him then, searching his face for something, reassurance, absolution, understanding. He didn't know which, didn't know if he could give any of them. "I keep seeing his face," she said quietly, "the moment the bullet hit. The way he looked surprised, like he didn't think it would really happen." "I know." "Does it go away?" "No, but it gets quieter." She nodded slowly, swallowed. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not lying to me." She walked away before he could respond, heading toward the general store where Dutch was already measuring boards for Jed's coffin. Ronin watched her go, then turned back to the bodies. Jed Merrick looked smaller in death. They always did. Like dying took up space you didn't know you had and left you diminished. His face was peaceful, though. Whatever pain he'd carried, and it had been considerable judging by the coughing, was gone now. "You did good today," Ronin said quietly to the dead man. "Better than you had to. Better than most." No response. Of course not. But saying it out loud felt important anyway, like bearing witness mattered, even when nobody was listening. Footsteps behind him. Ronin turned to find Sam Tillman standing there, looking lost. "Marie said you wanted to talk," Sam said. His voice was hollow, scraped out. "I did, but if you're not ready, I killed him." The words came out flat, final. "I walked up behind him, and I pulled the trigger, and I killed him. Yeah. He had a face, a name, probably, maybe a family. Probably. And I killed him anyway." Ronin gestured to a fallen beam from the boarding house. "Sit." Sam sat. Ronin sat next to him, feeling every year of his age and the way his joints protested. "You want me to tell you it's okay?" Ronin asked. "That you did the right thing and you should feel good about it?" "I don't know what I want." "Fair enough. Ronin looked at the ruins around them. Let me tell you what I know. That man you killed? He was here to burn this town, to kill everyone in it if they didn't run. He chose that, not you. You didn't start this fight. But I finished it. You survived it. There's a difference. Sam shook his head. I keep seeing his face, the way he looked when his voice cracked. I didn't even know his name. Does it matter? Shouldn't it? I don't know, Ronin admitted. Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I do know. You saved my life today. Probably saved Alara's too, and your wife's. That man was going to kill me, and you stopped him. That's not murder. That's protection. It doesn't feel like protection. No. It feels like you took a life. And that weight doesn't care about reasons or justifications or whether you were right or wrong. It just sits on you. Ronin looked at his hands, scarred, rough, marked by years of violence. But you can carry it. I know you can. How do you know? Because you're still here, still breathing, still able to feel bad about it. Ronin met his eyes. The men who can't carry it, they stop feeling. They tell themselves it doesn't matter, that it was just business, just survival, just the way things are. You're not doing that. You're facing it. That takes strength. Sam was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't feel strong. You don't have to. You just have to keep going. And if I can't, then you lean on the people around you. Marie, Alara, Dutch, me. We all carry pieces of this. You don't have to carry it alone. Sam nodded slowly. Didn't look convinced, but maybe a little less lost. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're going to have bad nights. Dreams. Moments where it all comes back and you can't breathe. But they'll pass. And eventually you'll have more good days than bad ones. You sound like you know from experience. I do. How many? Ronin knew what he was asking. 36. Before today. And it still hurts? Every single one. Then how do you keep going? Ronin considered that. It was the question, wasn't it? The one he'd been asking himself for 15 years. Because the alternative is giving up. And giving up means they win. The men who did bad things, who hurt innocent people, who made the world a little darker. They win if we let it break us. So I keep going. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only thing I know how to do. Sam looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Okay? Okay, I'll try. That's all anyone can do. They sat together in silence as the sun finally dropped below the horizon and the first stars appeared. After a while, Marie came looking for Sam, and he stood to go. But he paused, looked back at Ronin. You could have killed Crow, Sam said. Why didn't you? Ronin thought about lying, about giving a noble answer that would sound good and make sense. But Sam deserved better than that. Because I'm tired of killing, Ronin said, and because I wanted to prove to myself that I could make a different choice, that I wasn't just the sum of those 36 notches. Did it work? Ask me in a year. Sam nodded. Then he was gone, walking back to his wife and whatever future they'd managed to build from the wreckage. Ronin stayed where he was, alone with the dead and the dark. The next morning came too early and too bright. Ronin woke in the livery with his arm throbbing and his whole body feeling like it had been dragged behind a horse. He sat up slowly, grimacing, and found Dutch standing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. You look like hell, Dutch said. Feel worse. Good. Means you're still alive. Dutch handed him a cup. The coffee was terrible, burnt and bitter, but it was hot and it was caffeine, which made it tolerable. How's the town? Ronin asked. Still standing, barely. Dutch sat on a barrel, groaning as his knees popped. We finished Jed's coffin around midnight, going to bury him this afternoon. The others we burned last night. Alara said a few words, kept it brief. Good. You should have been there. I was where I needed to be. Dutch gave him a look but didn't push. Sam's doing better. Talked to Marie this morning. He's not great, but he's functional. Alara's organizing cleanup crews. Widow Callahan's making food for everyone. And I've got a list of repairs that's longer than my patience. Business as usual, then. Something like that. Dutch took a sip of coffee, made a face. We need to talk about what comes next. I figured. Crow's going to report back to the company, tell them we fought back, and they're going to make a decision. Either write this town off as too much trouble or send more men. My money's on more men. Mine too. Dutch set his cup down. Which means we need a plan, a real one, not just hide and shoot when they show up. Ronin rubbed his face. His stubble was getting long, gray mixing with the brown. When had that happened? What do you suggest? Fortify. Make this place harder to take. Build barriers, set up proper watch rotations, stockpile ammunition. Make it clear that coming here will cost them more than it's worth. That might work short term, but long term? Ronin shook his head. They've got unlimited resources. We don't. Eventually, they'll wear us down. So what's the alternative? We make it legal. Dutch frowned. How? Ilara's land, the spring. That's what they want. If we can get legal protection for it, make it untouchable. They've got no reason to keep pushing. And how exactly do we do that? The territorial government's in bed with companies like Frontier Development. They're not going to help us. Maybe not, but federal law might. Ronin stood, stretching carefully. There's a provision in the Homestead Act. If she can prove continuous habitation and improvement for 5 years, the land's hers, legally, can't be taken. She's been there 8 years. Then she files the claim, makes it official, and once it's filed, any attempt to seize it becomes a federal crime. Dutch considered that. It's risky. Filing means putting her name on official documents, makes her a target. She's already a target. Fair point. Dutch stood, joints creaking. I'll talk to her, see what she thinks. Do that. In the meantime, I'm going to ride out to the county seat, see if I can find a lawyer who isn't corrupt. Good luck with that. Yeah. Dutch headed for the door, then paused. You know they're going to call you a hero, right? The man who stood up to Crow, who saved the town. I'm not a hero. Maybe not, but that's how they'll see you. Dutch's expression was unreadable. Question is, can you live with that? Ronin didn't answer. Dutch left, and Ronin finished his terrible coffee alone. The burial happened at 2 in the afternoon. They dug the grave in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking town, a patch of ground with maybe 20 markers, most of them weathered beyond reading. Jed's was fresh carved, simple. His name, the years, nothing else. He hadn't wanted anything fancy. Everyone who could walk attended. Even the ones who'd barely known Jed came, because burying the dead was important. It meant something. It said that you remembered, that you cared, that the person had mattered. Dutch said a few words. Talked about Jed's service in the war, his years running a freight business, his stubborn refusal to quit even when his body was giving out. He died defending what he believed in, Dutch finished. Can't ask for more than that. They lowered the coffin, filled in the dirt. The widow Callahan sang something low and mournful that might have been a hymn, or might have been something older. Hard to tell. When it was done, people drifted away. Back to work. Back to life. Back to pretending that death wasn't standing right there waiting for all of them. Ronin stayed. He stood at the grave, hat in his hands, looking at the fresh-turned earth. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You shouldn't have been in that loft. Shouldn't have had to fight, but you did, and it mattered. I hope wherever you are now, you know that. No response, just wind and silence and the weight of another name he'd carry. Ilara came up beside him. You blame yourself. Should I not? He volunteered. You didn't force him. I gave him the option. Same thing. No, she said. It's not. Jed made his choice. It's the same as all of us. You need to respect that. Ronin wanted to argue, wanted to explain that respect didn't erase responsibility, but he was too tired and she was probably right anyway. Dutch talked to me about the Homestead Act, Ilara said. And? And I'm going to file. Tomorrow. Ride to the county seat and make it official. You want company? I was hoping you'd offer. They stood together, looking at the grave. After a while, Ilara spoke again. What you did yesterday, letting Crow live, people are talking about it. Let them talk. Some think you made a mistake. that you should have killed him while you had the chance. And you? She was quiet for a moment. I think you made the choice you could live with, and that takes more courage than pulling a trigger. Or more weakness. I don't think there's a difference, not in this case. She looked at him. You've killed enough, Ronin. You earned the right to stop. Doesn't mean he won't come back. No, but that's tomorrow's problem. Today you chose something different. That matters. Ronin nodded slowly. He wanted to believe her, wanted to think that one choice could outweigh 36 notches. But belief was hard when you'd seen what he'd seen, done what he'd done. Come on, Elara said. Let's get ready for tomorrow. We've got a long ride ahead of us. They walked back down the hill together, leaving Jed Merrick to rest in peace while the living figured out how to do the same. That night, Ronin sat in the livery cleaning his rifle. The work was meditative: disassemble, wipe down, oil, reassemble. He'd done it so many times he could do it blind. The repetition was soothing, familiar. Sam Tillman appeared in the doorway, hesitant. Can I come in? He asked. It's a free country, supposedly. Sam came in, looking around like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. Finally, he settled on leaning against a post. I've been thinking about what you said, Sam started. About carrying the weight, about leaning on people. And I wanted to say thank you for not treating me like I'm broken, for just being honest. Honest's all I've got. It's more than most people give. Sam was quiet for a moment. I also wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. Do you think Crow's coming back? Ronin looked up from the rifle. Yeah, I do. When? Could be weeks, could be months, but he'll come back, or someone will. Men like that don't let things go. Sam absorbed that. Then we need to be ready. We do. Will you teach me? Teach you what? How to fight, how to shoot better, how to not freeze when things go bad. Sam's jaw was set, determined. I got lucky yesterday. Next time I might not. I need to be better. Ronin studied him, saw a young man trying to turn fear into purpose, grief into strength. It was admirable, also dangerous. The line between learning to protect yourself and becoming the thing you were protecting against was thin, easy to cross without realizing it. I'll teach you, Ronin said, but you need to understand something first. What? Getting better at violence doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you more dangerous, and dangerous isn't the same as safe. I know. Do you? Because I've seen a lot of men convince themselves that if they were just a little faster, a little meaner, a little more willing to kill, they'd be safe. And you know what happened to them? What? They died anyway. Or worse, they lived and became the kind of men people need protecting from. Sam's expression didn't change. I'm not trying to become a killer. I'm trying to protect my family. Those two things aren't as different as you think. Maybe not. But I'd rather have the option and not need it than need it and not have it. Ronin couldn't argue with that. It was the same logic that had kept him alive for 20 years. The same logic that had also cost him pieces of his soul he'd never get back. All right, he said. We'll start tomorrow. After Elara and I get back from the county seat. I'll show you how to shoot properly, how to move, how to think under pressure. But Sam? Yeah? The moment you start enjoying it, you stop. Understand? Sam nodded. I understand. Good. Now get some sleep. You look like you haven't slept in days. I haven't. Then go. Your wife needs you rested more than she needs you trained. Sam left. Ronin went back to cleaning the rifle, but his mind was elsewhere. On choices and consequences. On the difference between protection and violence. On whether there was a way to teach someone to survive without also teaching them to become something they'd hate. He didn't have answers, just the rifle in his hands and 36 notches that proved he'd asked these questions before and failed to find anything satisfying. Outside, the town settled into uneasy sleep. Guards walked the perimeter, Dutch's idea, implemented immediately. People locked their doors and windows, kept guns close, waited for the next threat that might come tomorrow, or next month, or never. And Ronin Hale sat in the darkness, wondering if he'd made the right choice letting Victor Crow live, or if he'd just delayed the inevitable. Only time would tell. And time, he'd learned, was rarely kind. The ride to the county seat took most of the day. Ronin and Alara left at first light, their horses moving at a steady pace across terrain that shifted from scrubland to rocky hills and back again. The sky was clear, the kind of blue that hurt to look at, and the sun climbed slow and merciless overhead. They didn't talk much for the first few hours. Partly because conversation required energy they were both conserving, and partly because there wasn't much to say. The silence between them was comfortable, though, the kind that came from two people who'd been through something together and didn't need words to fill the space. Around noon, they stopped to water the horses at a creek that was more mud than water. Alara dismounted stiffly, grimacing. "You all right?" Ronin asked. "I'm not used to riding this long. My back's complaining." "We can rest longer if you need." "No, I want to get there, file the claim, and get back before dark." She stretched, wincing. "How's your arm?" "Still attached." "That's not what I asked." "It hurts, but I've had worse." She came over, pulled back the makeshift bandage he'd wrapped around it that morning. The wound was clean, no signs of infection, but the edges were angry and red. "You should have let the widow stitch this properly." "Didn't have time." "You never have time for yourself, do you?" "There's always something more important." Alara shook her head but didn't argue. She rewrapped the bandage, her hands gentle but efficient. "You're stubborn." "So I've been told. It's going to get infected if you're not careful." "Then I'll be careful." She gave him a look that said she didn't believe him, but she let it go. They remounted and kept riding. The county seat was called Warren's Cross, though nobody remembered who Warren was or what he'd crossed. It was bigger than their town, maybe 300 people, with actual streets, a courthouse, 2 saloons, and a hotel that looked like it might not collapse if you sneezed near it. They arrived just before 3 in the afternoon, dusty and tired and ready to be done with this errand. The land office was in the courthouse basement, a cramped room that smelled like mildew and old paper. A clerk sat behind a desk covered in files, looking half asleep until they walked in. He was young, maybe 25, with ink stains on his fingers and the kind of pale skin that said he didn't get outside much. "Help you?" he asked without much enthusiasm. "I need to file a Homestead Act claim," Alara said. That got his attention. He sat up straighter, reached for a form. "Name?" "Alara Voss." "Property location?" She gave him the details, section, township, range, all the bureaucratic nonsense that turned land into numbers on a page. The clerk wrote it down in careful script, occasionally glancing up at her like he was trying to figure out if she was serious. "You've been on this land continuously for 5 years?" he asked. 8? "And you've made improvements? Structures, wells, cultivation?" "All of that. My father built the original cabin and dug the well. I've maintained it, expanded the house, cleared fields." The clerk nodded, still writing. "There's a filing fee. $20. Alara counted out the money from a small pouch she kept in her saddlebag. The clerk took it, stamped the form, made a notation in a ledger. "You'll need to have the claim surveyed within 6 months," he said. "And there's a residency requirement. You have to live on the property for the full 5 years from the date of filing." "I've already been there 8 years." "Doesn't matter. Clock starts from filing date." He handed her a copy of the form. "Once the survey's complete and the residency period is up, you can apply for the patent. After that, it's yours free and clear." "What happens if someone tries to take it before then?" The clerk blinked. "Take it how?" "By force or legal maneuvering." "Well, once it's filed, any attempt to seize homesteaded land becomes a federal matter. You'd have recourse through the territorial courts and potentially federal marshals if it came to that." He paused. "Is someone trying to take your land?" "They were," Alara said. "We discouraged them." The clerk looked like he wanted to ask more questions but decided against it. Smart man. "Well, you're filed now. Keep that copy safe. It's proof of your claim." They left the courthouse with the document carefully folded in Alara's saddlebag. Outside, the sun was starting its descent, painting the buildings in shades of amber. "We should stay the night," Ronin said. "Ride back in the morning. The horses need rest." Alara looked torn. "I don't like leaving the town undefended. It's got Dutch, and Sam, and 10 other people with guns who know how to use them. They'll be fine for 1 night." She didn't look convinced, but she was tired enough to agree. They found the hotel, the Frontier House, which was optimistic naming for a building held together with hope and termite damage, and got 2 rooms on the second floor. Ronin's room was small, with a bed that sagged in the middle and a window that didn't quite close. But it had 4 walls and a roof, which made it better than a lot of places he'd slept. He washed the trail dust off as best he could with the pitcher and basin, then sat on the bed and stared at his rifle. 36 notches. He'd been staring at them a lot lately, trying to figure out if they defined him or if he'd somehow grown past them. The answer kept changing depending on his mood. There was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Alara standing there, looking uncertain. "You eaten yet?" she asked. "No. There's a place down the street, supposed to be decent. You want Yeah, give me a minute." They walked to the restaurant, a narrow establishment called Rosa's that smelled like grease and spices. It was crowded, mostly locals, but they found a table in the back. The food came fast. Steak that was tougher than it should have been, potatoes that were underseasoned, bread that was yesterday's at best. Ronin ate it anyway. Food was food. Alara picked at her plate, not really eating. After a while, she set her fork down. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "What made you quit being a marshal?" Ronin took a drink of water, buying time. It wasn't a question he liked answering, but she'd earned the right to ask. "There was a town in Missouri, little place, smaller than ours. I was tracking a man named Colfax, wanted for murder, robbery, arson. He'd killed a family outside Kansas City, burned their farm. Did you catch him?" "Yeah, I caught him." Ronin stared at his plate. "He was hiding in a boarding house. I went in to arrest him, and he started shooting. Hit a woman who was just walking down the hallway. Killed her instantly." Alara was quiet, waiting. "I killed Colfax," Ronin continued. "Put 3 rounds in him. And when it was done, I stood there looking at that woman's body, and I realized something." "What?" "That I'd become so focused on catching bad men that I'd stopped seeing the good people around them, stopped calculating the cost. I was willing to risk anything, anyone, as long as I got my man." He met her eyes. "That woman died because I kicked in a door without thinking about who else might be on the other side. And I couldn't keep doing that. So you walked away." "So I walked away, turned in my badge, started moving, told myself I'd find a place where I could just be quiet, just fix things instead of breaking them." "And did you?" "For a while. Then Crow showed up and reminded me that quiet doesn't last." Alara nodded slowly. "Do you regret it? Quitting?" "Some days. Other days I think it was the smartest thing I ever did." He pushed his plate away. "What about you? Why'd you stay when everyone else left?" "Because it's mine," she said simply. "My father built that place. Bled for it. Died thinking I'd keep it going. I'm not letting some company with more money than sense take it away because it's convenient for them." "Even if it costs you everything?" "Everything's already been taken from me once. My mother died when I was 12, my father when I was 20. I lost the man I was supposed to marry to cholera 3 years ago. This land is all I have left, and I'll die before I give it up." There was steel in her voice, the kind that didn't bend. "You're going to make them work for it," Ronin said. "Damn right I am." They finished eating in silence. Afterward, they walked back to the hotel through streets that were starting to empty as night settled in. At the top of the stairs, Alara paused outside her room. "Thank you," she said, "for coming with me today. For everything." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You could have left. After the fight, after Crow rode out, you could have saddled your horse and disappeared. Nobody would have blamed you." She looked at him. "But you stayed. That means something." Ronin didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Alara reached out, squeezed his hand briefly. Then she was inside her room, the door closing softly behind her. Ronin stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. Then he went to his own room, locked it, and tried to sleep. The dreams came anyway. They always did after violence. His mind replaying the fight, the shots, the bodies. But this time it was different. This time he saw Crow's face when the bullet hit his hand. Saw the fear, the pain, the realization that he wasn't invincible. And Ronin saw himself lowering the rifle, making the choice. He woke before dawn, sweating despite the cool air. His arm throbbed, his leg ached, he felt every one of his years. But he was alive, and that was something. They rode back to town under a sky streaked with pink and orange. The horses were rested, the pace easier. Alara seemed lighter somehow, like filing the claim had lifted a weight she'd been carrying. "You think it'll actually help?" she asked as they rode. "The homestead filing? It gives you legal standing. That's more than you had yesterday." "But will it stop them?" "No," Ronin admitted, "but it makes it harder, more expensive, more risky. Companies like Frontier Development, they do cost-benefit analysis. If taking your land costs more than it's worth, they'll move on. And if it doesn't, then we make it cost more." She smiled at that. Not a happy smile, but a grim one. "You know what I realized last night?" "What?" "I'm not scared anymore. I was terrified when Crow first showed up. Terrified when his men came to my place. Terrified during the fight. But now?" She shook her head. "Now I'm just angry, and anger's easier to work with than fear. Anger gets you killed if you're not careful. So does fear." "Fair point." They rode in silence for a while. The landscape rolled past, familiar and unchanging. This was hard country. It didn't forgive mistakes, but it also didn't lie to you. You knew where you stood. Around midday, they crested a rise and saw smoke. Not campfire smoke. Too much, too dark. Something was burning. Ronin spurred his horse forward, Alara right behind him. They covered the last 2 miles at a gallop, and as they got closer, the smoke became a column, thick and black. It was coming from the town. They rode in hard, horses lathered and breathing heavy. The main street was chaos, people running with buckets, shouting, trying to contain a fire that had already consumed half of the old saloon. Dutch saw them coming and ran over. His face was black with soot, his eyes wild. "When did this start?" Ronin demanded. "An hour ago, maybe less. We don't know how it started, just found it burning." "Anyone hurt?" "Not yet, but the wind's picking up. If it spreads, get everyone on the bucket line. Pull water from every source. Wet down the buildings on either side." Dutch nodded and ran off, shouting orders. Ronin and Alara dismounted, tied their horses, and joined the fight. It took 3 hours to kill the fire. By the time they were done, the saloon was gone. Just a smoking shell of charred wood and collapsed roof beams. But they'd kept it from spreading, which was a victory of sorts. People collapsed where they stood, exhausted. Some coughed from the smoke. Others just stared at the ruins, too tired to process what had happened. Ronin found Sam sitting on the steps of the general store, face in his hands. "You all right?" Ronin asked. Sam looked up. His eyes were red, and not just from smoke. "It was me." "What?" "The fire. It was my fault." His voice cracked. "I was in there this morning, checking for structural damage from the fight. I had a lantern. I must have knocked it over, or set it down wrong. Or, I don't know, but I started it." Ronin sat down next to him. "Accidents happen. People could have died. But they didn't. This time. What about next time? What if I make another mistake and someone gets hurt because I'm—" He stopped, struggling for words. "Because I don't know what I'm doing." "None of us know what we're doing, Sam. We're just making it up as we go." "You knew what you were doing during the fight. Did I? Because from where I was standing, I was just trying not to get shot and hoping everyone else did the same." Ronin leaned back against the steps. "You think experience makes you perfect? It doesn't. It just gives you more opportunities to make different mistakes." "That's not reassuring." "It's not supposed to be. It's just true." Ronin looked at the young man. "You want to quit? Walk away? No one would blame you." "No." Sam's jaw set. "I'm not quitting. I just need to be better." "Then learn from this. Be more careful. Pay attention. But don't let it paralyze you." Sam nodded slowly. "Okay? Okay? Okay, I'll try." Ronin stood, joints protesting. "Come on, we've got cleanup to do." They worked into the evening, clearing debris, salvaging what they could. It wasn't much. The saloon had been mostly empty anyway. Nobody had been drinking there in years. But it was still a building, still part of the town, and losing it hurt. As darkness fell, Dutch called another meeting. Everyone gathered in front of the general store, fewer people than last time. Some families had left after the fight, deciding that Crow's money was starting to look pretty good. Ronin didn't blame them. "We need to talk about what happened today," Dutch said. "The fire was an accident, but it's also a reminder that we're vulnerable. One spark in the wrong place, one mistake, and we could lose everything." "So what do we do?" the widow Callahan asked. "We get organized. Proper watch rotations, fire prevention, safety protocols." Dutch looked around. "And we need to decide if we're really committed to this, because if Crow comes back, and he will, it's going to be worse than last time." "He might not come back," someone said. Ronin didn't see who. "He will," Ronin said flatly. "Men like Crow don't forget. They don't forgive. They just get angrier and more determined." "So we're supposed to live in fear, waiting for him to show up?" "No, we're supposed to prepare, make this place as defensible as possible. And in the meantime, we make it legal." Alara filed her homestead claim yesterday. That gives us federal protection. Not perfect, but better than nothing. "And if that doesn't stop them?" Ronin met the speaker's eyes. "Then we do what we did before. We stand, we fight, and we make them pay for every inch." Silence, heavy and uncertain. Then Alara spoke up. "I'm staying. This is my land, my home, and I'm not giving it to anyone." "I'm staying too," Dutch said. "Too old to start over somewhere else." Sam looked at Marie. She nodded. "We're staying," Sam said. One by one, the others agreed. Not all of them. 3 families said they were leaving, and Ronin saw the relief in their faces when they said it. But most stayed. 12 had become 9. 9 was still enough. After the meeting, Ronin walked the perimeter of the town, checking sight lines, looking for weaknesses. The burned saloon was a gap in their defenses now. They'd need to figure out how to cover it. Alara found him standing in the ruins, looking at the charred beams. "You're thinking about Crow," she said. "I'm thinking about what he'll bring when he comes back." "More men?" "More men. Better weapons. Maybe even try to get the territorial militia involved." Ronin kicked at a piece of charred wood. "We got lucky last time. Surprise and good positions. Next time, they'll know what they're walking into." "So we change the equation." "How?" "I don't know yet. But we will." She came to stand beside him. "We didn't file that claim just to roll over when things get hard." "I know." "Do you?" She looked at him. "Because sometimes I get the feeling you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for this to fall apart so you can tell yourself you were right to not get attached." Ronin didn't answer right away. She was close to something he didn't like examining. "Maybe," he admitted finally. "Old habits. You need new habits." Easier said than done. "Most things are." She touched his arm, the good one. "But you're here. You're still standing. That counts." "We'll see." She left him there in the ruins, and Ronin stood alone as darkness settled in completely. The stars came out, cold and distant, and he thought about choices, about consequences, about whether letting Crow live had been mercy or just delayed execution. He didn't have answers, just a rifle with 36 notches and a town full of people who were counting on him to know what he was doing. The weight of that was heavier than the bodies he'd buried. 3 days later, a rider came into town. Not one of Crow's men. This one was older, wearing a badge that caught the sunlight. He rode slow and careful, hands visible, making it clear he wasn't here for trouble. Ronin met him in the street, rifle in hand but not raised. "Help you?" Ronin asked. The man dismounted carefully. Up close, he was maybe 50, weathered and tired-looking. The badge said U.S. Marshal. "Looking for Ronin Hale," the marshal said. "You found him." The marshal studied him. "You don't look like your descriptions. Descriptions are 20 years old. People change." "Some things don't." The marshal reached into his coat, slowly, and pulled out a folded paper. "Got a message for you, from the territorial governor's office." Ronin took it, unfolded it, read. His expression didn't change, but something cold settled in his gut. "Problem?" the marshal asked. "You could say that." Ronin handed the paper to Alara, who'd appeared at his shoulder. She read it, her face going pale. "They're sending troops?" she said. "That's not legal. They can't." "They can if they claim civil unrest," the marshal said. which is what the Frontier Development Company's lawyers are arguing. They say you attacked their representatives, killed 4 men, burned property. We defended ourselves, Ronin said. That's for a judge to decide. But in the meantime, there's a detachment of territorial militia on their way here. 20 men. They'll arrive in about a week. To do what? Restore order, secure the area, evict anyone who doesn't have legal claim to their property. Alara filed a homestead claim, Ronin said. I saw that. It's noted. The marshal looked uncomfortable. But until the survey is complete and the residency period is up, it's not finalized, which means technically the company can still contest it. This is insane, Alara said. They're using the law to steal our land. They're using the law because you made it expensive to use violence, the marshal said. Be glad of that at least. Ronin wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this was corrupt and wrong and exactly the kind of thing he'd spent 20 years fighting against. But the marshal was just a messenger, and shooting the messenger didn't change the message. When do they arrive? Ronin asked. 7 days. Maybe 6 if they push hard. The marshal mounted his horse. For what it's worth, I think you're getting a raw deal. But I've got my orders, and you've got yours. I'd suggest you figure out what you're going to do before they get here. He rode out, leaving Ronin and Alara standing in the street with a piece of paper that might as well have been a death sentence. 20 militia, Alara said quietly. We can't fight that. No, we can't. So what do we do? Ronin looked at the town, at the people who'd trusted him, who'd stood and fought and bled because he told them they could win, and now? Now he had to figure out how to save them from the consequences of that choice. I don't know, he said, but we've got 6 days to come up with something. 6 days wasn't enough time to build a miracle, but it was enough to make hard choices. The town gathered that night in what was left of their defensible space. The general store, the boarding house with its fire-scarred walls, the church that still smelled like gunpowder from the fight. Everyone knew what was coming. The question was what they were going to do about it. Dutch laid it out plain. 20 territorial militia means this isn't a fight we can win with rifles and good positioning. They'll have artillery if they want it, legal authority, the backing of the territorial government. We try to fight them the way we fought Crow, and we all end up dead or in prison. So, we surrender? Marie Tillman's voice was sharp. Give them what they want? I'm saying we need to think different, Dutch replied. Fighting isn't always about bullets. Sam stood up, his face conflicted. But we already fought. We already killed Crow's men. If we back down now, what was the point? Jed died for nothing? Jed died defending his home, Ronin said quietly. He'd been standing in the back, listening. Now all eyes turned to him. And he'd be the first to tell you that dying for a point is stupid when living to fight another day is an option. What are you saying? Alara asked. Ronin stepped forward into the lamplight. His arm was still bandaged, his face lined with exhaustion. I'm saying we can't beat 20 soldiers in open combat, but we don't have to. We just need to make it so expensive, so complicated, so publicly embarrassing that the company decides it's not worth it. How? The widow Callahan asked. We use their own weapon against them. The law. Ronin looked at Alara. You filed a homestead claim. That's federal, the militia's territorial. There's jurisdiction overlap there, and lawyers hate overlap. But the marshal said the claim isn't finalized, someone pointed out. Doesn't matter. It's filed. It's on record, which means any attempt to evict Alara becomes a federal question, not a territorial one. Ronin started pacing, thinking out loud. We need to make noise, get this in front of people who can't be bought, newspapers, federal judges, politicians who care about land rights. And how do we do that in 6 days? Dutch asked. We don't, but we start. Ronin stopped pacing. I ride to Santa Fe tomorrow. Find a newspaper, a lawyer who isn't in the company's pocket, anyone who'll listen. Tell them what's happening here. Make it public. Make it ugly. That still leaves the militia showing up, Sam said. Let them show up. But when they do, they're not dealing with a bunch of squatters they can quietly evict. They're dealing with legal homesteaders who've filed proper claims and have the attention of people who matter. Ronin looked around the room. It won't stop them immediately, but it'll slow them down. And slow is what we need. What about the rest of us? Alara asked. While you're in Santa Fe? You prepare, document everything. The attack by Crow's men, the deaths, the fire. Get statements from everyone. Make it official." He turned to Dutch. "And you keep the peace. When that militia shows up, you don't fight. You don't resist. You ask to see their orders, you demand proper legal process, and you make them jump through every bureaucratic hoop you can think of." "That's a lot of trust to put in paperwork," Marie said. "It is, but it's better than getting shot." Ronin's voice was firm. "We already proved we can fight. Now we prove we're smart enough not to when there's another way." The room was quiet. People looked at each other, weighing options that all felt bad in different ways. Finally, Alara stood. "I think Ronin's right. We can't win a shooting war with the territorial government, but we might be able to win a legal one, or at least survive long enough to make them reconsider." "And if it doesn't work?" someone asked. "Then we're no worse off than we are now," she said. "At least this way we're trying something other than dying." One by one, people nodded. It wasn't enthusiasm. It was exhausted acceptance. But it was enough. The meeting broke up. People drifted back to their homes, their fears, their private calculations of risk and reward. Ronin stayed behind with Alara and Dutch. "You really think this will work?" Dutch asked. "I think it's the best chance we've got." "That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." Ronin sat down heavily on a crate. "But I'm tired of winning battles and losing wars. If we kill militia soldiers, we're outlaws. The company wins by default. This way, maybe we actually change something." "Or you ride into Santa Fe and get arrested for murder," Dutch pointed out. "You did kill 4 men. Self-defense or not, there's bodies with your bullets in them." "I know. And you're going anyway." "I am." Dutch shook his head. "You're either brave or stupid, Hale. Still haven't figured out which." "Most days neither have I." Alara walked Dutch to the door, then came back. She sat across from Ronin, studying him in the dim light. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We could find someone else to ride to Santa Fe. Someone who isn't wanted for anything." "Who?" "Sam's got a family. Dutch is too old. The widow's too valuable here. And you—" He stopped. "And I what? You're the one with the legal claim. You need to be here to defend it." "That's not what you were going to say." Ronin met her eyes. "No. I was going to say that if something goes wrong in Santa Fe, I'd rather it be me taking the risk than you." "Why?" "Because I've already lived a full life. A hard one. Mostly bad, but full. You've got years ahead of you. A chance to build something that matters. And I'll be damned if I let that get taken away because I was too scared to ride into potential trouble." Alara was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're a good man, Ronin Hale. Better than you think you are." "You don't know what I've done." "I know what you've done here, and that's what matters to me." She stood, touched his shoulder briefly, and left. Ronin sat alone in the empty store, listening to the building settle and creak around him. Tomorrow he'd ride to Santa Fe. Either he'd find help or he'd find a noose. Either way, at least he'd be doing something other than waiting for the inevitable. He left before dawn. The ride to Santa Fe took 2 days of hard travel. Ronin pushed his horse as much as he dared, sleeping rough both nights, eating jerky and hardtack that sat in his stomach like rocks. His arm ached constantly, and by the second day he was pretty sure it was infected despite Alara's careful bandaging. But there wasn't time to stop, wasn't time to rest. Santa Fe was bigger than he remembered, sprawling, loud, full of people who looked at him like he was just another dusty drifter. Which was fine. Anonymous was good. He found the newspaper office first, the Santa Fe Chronicle, housed in a narrow building that smelled like ink and tobacco. The editor was a thin man with spectacles and the kind of permanent scowl that came from years of disappointing news. "Help you?" the editor asked without looking up from the page he was editing. "I've got a story," Ronin said. "Everyone's got a story. This one involves land theft, corporate corruption, and murder." That got the editor's attention. He looked up, eyes sharp behind the glasses. "Go on," Ronin told him. Not everything. Didn't mention his own past, kept it focused on Alara's claim, Crow's attack, the bodies in the street, the militia coming to finish what the company started. He kept it factual, straightforward, the kind of thing that could be verified. The editor listened, occasionally making notes. When Ronin finished, the man sat back. You got proof? He asked. Witnesses, a filed homestead claim, 4 dead men who rode in with a land agent. That last part cuts both ways. You killed those men. Self-defense. You got a judge to say that? Not yet. The editor studied him. This company, Frontier Development, they advertise with us. Pull those ads and we lose money. Ronin's jaw tightened. So you won't run it. Didn't say that. The editor tapped his pencil on the desk. But I need more than your word. I need documents, statements, something that makes this worth the risk. Ronin reached into his coat, pulled out the copy of Alara's homestead filing. There's your documentation. Federal land claim properly filed. Everything else can be verified through the Territorial Land Office. The editor took it, read it carefully. His expression didn't change, but Ronin saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. I'll look into it, the editor said finally. If it checks out, I'll run something, but I'm not making promises. That's all I'm asking. Where can I reach you? You can't. I'll check back in 2 days. Ronin left before the editor could ask more questions. He had one more stop to make. The law office of Henderson and Associates was tucked between a dry goods store and a boarding house. Ronin had gotten the name from the land office clerk. Apparently Henderson had a reputation for taking cases against big companies. Either he was principled or he was stupid. Either way, it made him worth talking to. The office was small, cluttered with papers and law books. Henderson himself was younger than Ronin expected, maybe 40, with thinning hair and the kind of energy that came from too much coffee and too little sleep. Mr. Hale, Henderson said after Ronin introduced himself. What brings you here? Ronin explained the situation again. Henderson listened, taking occasional notes, his expression growing more interested as the story unfolded. This is a clear case of corporate overreach, Henderson said when Ronin finished, but it's also complicated. The militia involvement muddies the waters. They'll claim they're restoring order, not enforcing an eviction. Can you fight it? I can file injunctions, demand proper legal proceedings, make them justify every step. Henderson leaned back. But I need to be honest with you. This will take time, months, maybe longer, and there's no guarantee we win. What's it cost? For a case like this? More than you probably have. Ronin had expected that. What if I told you this could set precedent, that winning this could help other homesteaders fighting the same fight? Henderson smiled slightly. Then I'd say you know how to appeal to a lawyer's vanity. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. I'll take it. Reduced fee. We win, I recoup costs from the company. We lose. He shrugged. Well, at least I tried. That's good enough for me. They spent the next hour going over details, signing papers, building a legal strategy that felt both brilliant and completely inadequate. But it was something, a framework, a way forward that didn't involve bullets. When Ronin left, the sun was setting. He found a cheap hotel, paid for a room, and collapsed on the bed without bothering to take off his boots. Sleep didn't come easy. His arm was on fire, his head pounded, and every time he closed his eyes he saw the town burning, saw the militia riding in, saw everything he'd tried to build falling apart. But he'd done what he came to do. Now he just had to hope it was enough. He rode back 2 days later, the newspaper in his saddlebag. The Chronicle had run the story. Not front page, but page 3, with a headline that read, Homesteaders face corporate eviction despite legal claims. It was fair, balanced, and damning. The editor had done his homework, verified the facts, and presented them in a way that made the Frontier Development Company look exactly like what they were. Land thieves hiding behind legal technicalities. It wouldn't stop the militia, but it might make them think twice about what they were doing. Ronin reached town on the 5th day after the marshal's visit, 1 day before the militia was due to arrive. The town looked different, more organized. Dutch had erected crude barriers at the main entrances, not to stop anyone, but to funnel them through specific points where they could be observed and documented. People had cleaned up the burned buildings, cleared debris, made the place look less like a war zone and more like a legitimate settlement. Alara met him at the edge of town, relief clear on her face. You made it back, she said. Did you doubt I would? A little. She smiled, but it was tight. What happened in Santa Fe? He handed her the newspaper. She read it quickly, her expression shifting from hope to something more complicated. "This is good," she said. But it's not a solution. I know." Ronin dismounted, his body protesting every movement. "I also hired a lawyer, Henderson. He's filing injunctions, demanding proper legal proceedings. It'll slow things down." "How much?" "I don't know, but it's better than nothing." Dutch appeared, saw Ronin, and nodded. "Good timing. Militia's expected tomorrow morning." "Everyone ready?" "As ready as we can be." "Statements are documented. Witnesses prepped. We've got copies of every legal filing, every land claim, every scrap of paper that proves we've got a right to be here." Dutch looked tired. "Still feels like bringing a knife to a gunfight." "Sometimes the knife wins," Ronin said, "especially if the other guy's worried about stabbing himself with it." They spent that night preparing. Not for battle, but for theater. Because that's what this was, a performance designed to make the militia hesitate, to make them question their orders, to make them think about consequences. Ronin cleaned his rifle one last time. 36 notches, no more, no less. He'd made a choice not to add to that count, and he was going to stick with it, even if it killed him. The militia arrived at 10 in the morning, 20 soldiers mounted with a captain leading them. They rode in formation, disciplined, professional. These weren't Crow's hired guns. These were trained men following orders they probably didn't question. The captain was young, maybe 30, with a fresh uniform and the kind of idealism that hadn't been beaten out of him yet. He halted his men at the edge of town, surveyed the barriers, and rode forward alone. Ronin met him in the street. No rifle this time, just standing there, hands visible, non-threatening. "I'm Captain Morrison," the young officer said. "Territorial militia. I'm here under orders to secure this area and facilitate legal proceedings regarding disputed land claims." Ronin Hale. "Well, I'm here to make sure those legal proceedings are actually legal." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "You're the one who killed 4 men. I defended myself in this town against armed aggressors. There's a difference. That's for a court to decide." "Agreed. So let's make sure there's a court involved and not just evictions at gunpoint." Morrison looked past him at the town. At the people gathered, not armed, not threatening, just standing there watching. At the barriers that were clearly symbolic rather than defensive. At the American flag someone had raised on a pole outside the general store. "I have my orders," Morrison said. "I'm sure you do. But I also have legal documentation that says these people have federal claims to this land. Claims that supersede territorial jurisdiction." Ronin pulled out the papers Henderson had prepared. "You want to enforce evictions? You're going to need federal authority. Do you have that?" Morrison took the papers, read them. His expression didn't change, but Ronin saw the uncertainty creep in. "This is a territorial matter," Morrison said, but there was less conviction in his voice. "That's not what federal law says. And I've got a lawyer in Santa Fe who's very interested in testing that in court." Ronin gestured to the town. "You can force the issue right now, round everyone up, burn their homes, seize the land, but it'll be in the newspapers by tomorrow, and it'll be in federal court by next week. Is that really what your orders were? To start a legal war with Washington?" Morrison was quiet for a long time. Behind him, his soldiers waited, watching. The whole town was watching, history balancing on the edge of a young captain's decision. "I need to consult with my superiors," Morrison said finally. "Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere." Morrison rode back to his men. They conferred for several minutes, long enough that Ronin started to wonder if he'd miscalculated. Then Morrison turned his horse toward the road. "We'll be back," he called out, "with proper authority and legal documentation. In the meantime, no one leaves, no one enters. This town is under observation." "Fair enough," Ronin called back. The militia rode out, not defeated but not victorious either, just delayed. The town exhaled collectively. Dutch came over, shaking his head. "That actually worked." "For now," Ronin said. "They'll be back." "But not today." "No, not today." Alara joined them, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion. "How long do we have?" "Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky." Ronin looked at the road where the militia had disappeared. "Long enough to make our case, to get more publicity, to make this messy enough that the company starts wondering if it's worth it. And if it's not enough, then we tried. That's more than most people get. The next week was strange. The town existed in a kind of limbo, not quite free, not quite under siege. The militia set up camp 2 miles out, close enough to enforce their observation, but far enough to avoid daily confrontation. Riders came and went, carrying messages, bringing supplies, reporting back to whoever was calling the shots. Henderson sent word from Santa Fe. The injunctions had been filed. A federal judge had agreed to review the case. Frontier Development's lawyers were scrambling, trying to get it dismissed before it gained traction. The newspaper ran a follow-up story, then another. Other papers picked it up. Suddenly, the forgotten town that nobody cared about was a test case for land rights across the territory. Public opinion started to shift. Not universally. Plenty of people sided with the company, argued that progress required tough decisions, that homesteaders were standing in the way of development. But enough people cared about the principle, about small people standing up to big companies, that the narrative changed, and narratives mattered. On the 8th day, a different rider came to town. Not militia, not company. A federal marshal, not the one from before, but an older man with gray in his beard and the kind of calm that came from seeing everything twice. His name was Garrett, and he carried papers that made Captain Morrison's look like scrap. "I'm here on behalf of the Federal Land Office," Garrett announced. He'd gathered everyone in the street, the town, Morrison's militia, everyone. "There's been a formal review of the homestead claims filed for properties in this area, specifically the claim filed by Alara Voss." Ronin felt his chest tighten. This was it. The moment everything either worked or fell apart. After review of the documentation, witness statements, and legal precedents, Garrett continued, the Federal Land Office has determined that Ms. Voss's claim is valid and properly filed. Furthermore, the attack on this settlement by agents of the Frontier Development Company constitutes interference with federal land proceedings, which is a criminal offense. Morrison looked stunned. "But the territorial orders are superseded by federal authority in matters of homesteading," Garrett interrupted. "Captain, your orders are rescinded. This town is under federal protection pending final resolution of land claims." "What about the deaths?" someone asked. "The men who were killed?" "Self-defense and protection of federal land claims," Garrett said. "No charges will be filed. The matter is closed." The silence that followed was profound. Alara looked at Ronin, tears in her eyes. "We won." "Looks like it," Ronin said quietly. "We actually won." The town erupted in celebration, not wild, not loud, but deep and genuine. People hugged, some cried. Dutch actually laughed, a sound Ronin had never heard from him before. Captain Morrison gathered his men and prepared to leave. Before he did, he rode over to Ronin. "You played this smart," Morrison said. "Used the system instead of fighting it." "Fighting it would have gotten us all killed," Ronin replied. "Maybe, but you proved something today, that the little guy can win if he's clever enough." Morrison nodded respectfully. "Good luck to you." "You too, Captain." The militia left. Marshal Garrett stayed long enough to serve papers on the Frontier Development Company's local agent. Apparently they had a representative in Warren's Cross who'd been coordinating everything. The charges included fraud, intimidation, and interference with federal land proceedings. The company would fight it, of course. Lawyers would argue for years. But the precedent was set. Homesteaders had rights that couldn't be bulldozed by corporate money. As the sun set that evening, the town gathered for an impromptu celebration. Someone found whiskey that didn't taste like poison. The widow Callahan made cornbread. People told stories, laughed, cried, and tried to process the fact that they'd actually survived. Ronin stood apart from it all, watching. He was happy for them, genuinely. But he also felt the distance opening up, the space between someone who'd helped them win and someone who belonged here. Alara found him as darkness settled in. "You're thinking about leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "Maybe," Ronin admitted. This was your fight. You won it. Don't need me anymore." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Town's safe. Land's protected. All the things I could help with are done." "And what about the things you could stay for?" He looked at her. "Like what?" "Like being part of something. Like having a home instead of just places you stop between running. She stepped closer. Like maybe finding out what kind of man you are when you're not carrying 36 notches and a death wish. I'm not sure there is a man under that. I am. Her voice was firm. I've seen him, the one who fixes things instead of breaking them, who chooses mercy over violence, who stands with people instead of apart from them. She touched his face. That man's worth knowing, and I'd like to get to know him better. Ronin didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to argue, to list all the reasons he was bad news, why getting close to him was a mistake. But standing there, looking at Alara's tired, hopeful face, he couldn't make the words come. I don't know how to do this, he said finally. How to just be normal. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. And if I can't, if I'm too broken, then you'll be broken here with people who care about you instead of broken alone on some trail to nowhere. She smiled. Besides, the town needs a new sheriff. Dutch suggested it. I seconded it. Everyone agreed. I'm not a lawman anymore. You never stopped being one. You just stopped carrying the badge. She pulled a tin star from her pocket, old, tarnished, probably salvaged from somewhere. It's not official, but it's real. If you want it. Ronin took the badge, felt its weight. It was lighter than he expected. Or maybe he was just tired of carrying heavy things. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. The celebration continued behind them. People who'd faced death and won, who'd stood together when everything said to run, who'd proven that sometimes the right kind of stubborn was stronger than money or guns or fear. Ronin looked at his rifle, still leaning against the wall where he'd left it. 36 notches that would never become 37. A history he couldn't erase but didn't have to repeat. Maybe Alara was right. Maybe there was a version of Ronin Hale that wasn't defined by who he'd killed or what he'd lost. Maybe that man could exist here, in this stubborn town full of stubborn people who decided that home was worth fighting for. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But for the first time in 15 years, Ronin thought maybe it was worth trying. He pinned the badge to his shirt. It caught the firelight, dull and honest. All right, he said. I'll stay. Alara smiled, genuine, warm, the kind of smile that made the world feel a little less heavy. Good. They walked back to the celebration together. Behind them, the town stood against the darkness, lit by lamps and hope and the stubborn refusal to give up. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. The company would appeal, the legal battles would continue, and there would be hard times ahead. But they'd face them together, these people who'd learned that standing your ground didn't always mean drawing your gun. Sometimes it meant drawing up the right papers and refusing to blink. Ronin Hale had spent 20 years learning how to end things. Now he was going to learn how to build them, how to be part of something instead of apart from it, how to choose a different path than the one carved into his rifle's stock. The legend that would grow around this town, and it would grow, stories always did, wouldn't be about the legendary gunfighter who killed his enemies. It would be about the man who'd had the shot and didn't take it, who'd chosen restraint over instinct, law over violence, mercy over vengeance. And in choosing differently, he'd changed everything. Not just for the town, for himself. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't to fight. It's to stop fighting long enough to remember what he's fighting for, and then to build that instead of just defending it. The stars came out overhead, cold and distant and beautiful. The same stars that had watched Ronin run for 15 years. Now they'd watch him stand still. And maybe, finally, that was enough.